President Trump sounding off over allegations of a fixed Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders supporters angrily weighing in, while one prominent Democratic governor says his party is acting like a circular firing squad ahead of a big election Tuesday. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. New fallout tonight from the bombshell allegations leveled against Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee by the committee's former interim chair, Donna Brazile. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen leads us off tonight with a look at who's weighing in and who's remaining conspicuously silent. A Democratic Party with a battle within itself, making party leaders in a few states, ones with close elections Tuesday, a little nervous.
I've seen some things in my time.
In the firestorm that greeted Donna Brazile's allegation that the Democratic National Committee rigged last year's primary to favor Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders, the most pointed assessment offered to reporters on the White House South Lawn came from the man who spent much of last year ascending to the pinnacle of American politics by decrying it as a rigged game.
You ought to look at Hillary Clinton, and you ought to look at the new book that was just put out by Donna Brazile, where she basically bought the DNC and she stole the election from Bernie.
In her forthcoming memoir, Brazile, the former interim DNC chair, alleges that a secret signed document transferred control of the DNC to the Clinton campaign in August 2015 in exchange for Mrs. Clinton's work to help retire the DNC's $15 billion bank debt. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi avoided direct comment.
You haven't heard me relitigate last year's election. I wasn't involved in the presidential. I'm only looking forward. This is about the future. I haven't had time to be reading any of that anyway.
Similar to the evasive maneuvers practiced by the Senate Minority Leader both on Thursday.
Do you believe there's corruption in the DNC?
I'm going to read the article before commenting.
And at a news conference on tax reform on Friday.
Thank you, everybody, and have a nice day. Thank you all for coming. Now all topics.
DNC revelations?
No. Just on this.
Current DNC chair Tom Perez pledged a fair primary process for 2020.
We're going to set the primary debate schedule well in advance of when we know who the candidates will be there.
But some prominent Democrats in Congress seized on the Brazile bombshell to position themselves as the party's true champions of transparency and campaign finance reform.
I'm with Hillary.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, a progressive and potential 2020 contender, told CNN's Jake Tapper she agrees the primary was rigged. And Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii posted a video that all but accused Hillary Clinton and the DNC of flouting campaign finance laws.
These laws essentially allowed the Clinton campaign to bypass individual campaign contribution limits by funneling millions of dollars through the DNC and state parties, taking control of the DNC in the process.
Also this week, the DNC fired its top fundraiser after 5 months on the job. Federal records show the DNC raised over $50 million from January to September, while the Republican National Committee, Bret, raised more than double that figure.
So this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Obviously, in a couple of states, there are some tight races Tuesday.
That's right. Tuesday, we'll see, for example, the big gubernatorial election in Virginia, pitting Ed Gillespie, the Republican, against Ralph Northam, the Democrat. Terry McAuliffe, the sitting governor of Virginia, a Democrat, very close with the Clintons, told MSNBC earlier today that Donna Brazile's allegations couldn't come at a worse time, given that big election that's upcoming, and he basically called this a circular firing squad amongst Democrats that's not going to help the party.
Okay, James, thank you. Donna Brazile's story has it all. It has big names, bigger allegations, a party at battle before an off-year election Tuesday, even President Trump weighing in. But as Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz reports, most of the media seem to ignore or significantly downplay that news.
Thank Bernie Sanders.
The charge that the Democratic primary process was rigged in Hillary Clinton's favor is an explosive story by any measure. But since Politico excerpted Donna Brazile's book yesterday, much of the mainstream media, which has exhaustively covered President Trump's battles with Republicans,
Mr. President, I rise today to say enough,
was strangely silent. There was nothing on NBC Nightly News, ABC's World News, or the CBS Evening News. Not a word in today's New York Times, even as one of the party's leading liberal voices has been highly critical.
This is a real problem.
Do you agree with the notion that it was rigged? Yes. See,
other than interviews with Elizabeth Warren by CNN's Jake Tapper and MSNBC's Chuck Todd,
it's really terrible.
Those two cable news networks did very little with the story yesterday. The Washington Post ran an inside the paper piece on Democrats expressing outrage. President Trump gave news organizations another reason to jump on the story, ripping the DNC on Twitter and on Fox News.
Now, I don't know if the mainstream fake media, because they are fake and phony, but I just don't know if they're going to pick it up. But I want to tell you, that is a big story.
But that hasn't broken through, even in a Trump-centric media universe where virtually everything this president does is news. And it's not that the losing candidate, still on her book tour, has dropped off the radar.
I'm not going anywhere. I walked in the woods. That was enough. I'm done with that.
But on the Brazil bombshell, not so much. Television sometimes shies away from important stories that are too abstract or too complicated or lack a big name. But a leading Democrat saying the party unfairly gamed the system for Hillary Clinton is just fascinating, but not, apparently, to all journalists. Brett?
Thanks, Howie. More on this with the panel. Another story getting a lot of attention today outside of politics. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl avoids prison time when he could have gotten life behind bars for walking off his Army post in Afghanistan in 2009. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more on today's sentencing that is generating, Jennifer, a lot of reaction.
That's right, Brett. Knowing that a military judge held his fate, Bo Bergdahl looked visibly shaken this morning as he re-entered the courtroom at Fort Bragg. The judge, Colonel Jeffrey Nance, read his ruling. It was brief. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl would receive no jail time, reduction to the rank of E1 or private, $1,000 forfeiture of pay per month for 10 months, and a dishonorable discharge. The decision on Sergeant Bergdahl is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military, President Trump wrote in a tweet. Bergdahl's defense lawyers had argued for no jail time since their client spent 4 of the 5 years in Taliban captivity in a cage and pled guilty to misbehavior before the enemy and desertion. They argued he was abused as a child and suffered from mental problems, including a form of schizophrenia. The prosecution sought 14 years imprisonment. They brought 3 witnesses who said they were injured looking for Bergdahl, including Staff Sergeant Mark Allen, who was shot in the head and remains bedridden. The judge would not allow testimony from former unit mates who said 6 troops were killed looking for Bergdahl due to a lack of evidence. Bergdahl's lawyers are appealing the dishonorable discharge, citing statements made by President Trump on the campaign trail.
President Trump's unprincipled effort to stoke a lynch mob atmosphere while seeking our nation's highest office has cast a dark cloud over the case. Every American should be offended by his assault on the fair administration of justice and his disdain for basic constitutional rights.
Bergdahl's lawyer went on to say his client wanted to thank the unit members who had searched for him and sustained what he called heroic injuries doing so. Brett.
Jennifer, thank you. A suspect accused of playing a significant role in the 2012 Benghazi attack faced a federal judge in Washington today. Mustafa al-Imam was captured days ago by U.S. Special Forces during a raid. He faces 3 criminal charges in the attack that killed 4 Americans and is the second suspect captured by the U.S. and brought to court. In the case, a suspected ringleader, Ahmed Abu Khatallah, is currently on trial in Washington. For the first time, the U.S. military conducted 2 airstrikes against ISIS in Somalia. Officials tell the Associated Press the strikes were carried out in northeastern Somalia. ISIS-linked fighters are a growing presence in the Horn of Africa nation, long threatened by al-Qaeda-linked extremist group al-Shabaab. President Trump is off to Asia on one of the longest trips of his presidency so far. But before turning his focus to foreign affairs, the president had a few things to say on some domestic matters today. Correspondent Kristen Fisher is at the White House tonight with a look at what was on the president's mind. Good evening, Kristen.
Well, Brett, just moments before leaving the White House this morning, President Trump made a surprise announcement that he'd be extending his trip by 1 day to attend a summit in the Philippines and making an already long trip even longer.
President Trump leaving Washington for what will be the longest trip to Asia by any president in a quarter century. For the next 13 days, President Trump will be pushing China to trade more fairly with the United States and stop militarizing the South China Sea. But his #1 focus is North Korea And he'll be leaning on the leaders of Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines, and most importantly, China, to put more pressure on Pyongyang.
We'll be enlisting the help of a lot of people and countries. We'll see what happens, but I think we're going to have a very successful trip.
He's leaving behind tax reform, something he hopes Republicans on Capitol Hill can deliver just 1 week after he returns. He's also leaving behind the growing cloud of the special counsel's investigation, which continued to seep its way into the West Wing this week. For the first time, today President Trump addressed former campaign associate George Papadopoulos' claim that he'd offered to arrange a meeting between then-candidate Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin back in March of 2016.
I don't remember much about that meeting. It was a very unimportant meeting, took place for a long time. Don't remember much about it.
But one issue he almost took with him was his pressuring of the Justice Department and the FBI to investigate his former political opponent, Hillary Clinton, her emails, and her campaign's funding of that now infamous Russian dossier. He tweeted about it 8 times today before taking off, saying at some point the Justice Department and the FBI must do what is right and proper.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department. I'm not supposed to be involved with the FBI. I'm not supposed to be doing the kind of things that I would love to be doing, and I'm very frustrated by it.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein responded by saying, "We can't allow ourselves to become numb to the president calling on independent law enforcement to investigate his political opponents." Now, in addition to his frustrations with the Justice Department, President Trump's also been very critical of the State Department. He's slashed its budget, refused to fill vacancies, and undercut its secretary for trying diplomacy with North Korea. But the president says none of that matters because, in the end, the world knows that the buck stops with him.
The one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters because when it comes to it, that's what the policy is going to be.
And Republican Senator Bob Corker is now weighing in on the president's pressuring of the FBI and the Justice Department. He calls it, quote, totally inappropriate, and says that not only does it undermine our justice system, but erode the American people's confidence in our institutions. Brett?
Kristen Fisher live on the North Lawn. Kristen, thank you. President Trump lands in Hawaii about an hour from now as he starts the first leg of this trip, eventually to Asia. My colleague and host of The Story, Martha McCallum, is already there. Joins me now to talk more about the president's trip. Good evening, Martha. It is amazing to see how big this trip has become, and it is even getting longer at the end.
Yeah, it certainly is, Brett, and it all starts here at the gateway to Asia as he stops in Hawaii. We do expect him to land in about an hour from now. The first and very important briefing of this trip will be when he sits down at PACCOM, the Pacific Command, which oversees essentially 50% of the globe and 36 countries under its naval and military jurisdiction. So he will sit down with them, and as everybody may remember, there have been several military incidents that have been problematic. I don't know whether or not they will come up at this briefing, but earlier this year, 17 sailors lost their lives on 2 guided missile destroyers, the Fitzgerald and the John S. McCain. That may come up during the course of this briefing. However, it will basically be based on the command that PACCOM oversees. That includes North Korea, South Korea, Japan, Guam, where we have U.S. air bases as well, of course, and also Hawaii. We now know that obviously North Korea and China both have nuclear capabilities that would land missiles in any one of those areas. So this is an area of the world that is very much at the ready, and it's the spear of our military defense, protecting the whole west coast of the United States and our capabilities beyond. So then after that, Brett, he will head to the Pearl Harbor USS Arizona, where he will take in the enormity of that moving experience. You see 1,177 members of our military who went down in Pearl Harbor when the Japanese swept in at 30 feet over the water here to destroy so much of our fleet. So that will be very much omnipresent in his mind as he begins this trip and sort of experiences the magnitude of World War II as he sets off. Brett?
Yeah, Martha, we will see you in 45 minutes live on The Story. Thank you. Special report will be on the road in Japan Sunday. We're taking our show on the road all next week. I'll be anchoring live from Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing as President Trump travels to the region. It all starts this coming Sunday with a bonus 6 p.m. Eastern Time edition of Special Report from Tokyo, and then an exclusive interview with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe Monday. With all of the domestic issues the president's facing, the specter of North Korea hangs over this trip, and obviously it will be big on a policy front. Ivanka Trump is speaking out about harassment of women in the workplace. The president's daughter spoke at a conference for women in Japan amid growing attention to sexual harassment around the world.
All too often, our workplace culture fails to treat women with appropriate respect. This takes many forms, including harassment, which can never be tolerated.
Ivanka traveled to Japan at the invitation of Prime Minister Abe and is set to leave one day before her father arrives there Sunday. Jobs numbers have bounced back after taking a hit from several hurricanes in September. Employers added 261,000 jobs in October, while the unemployment rate declined to 4.1%, the lowest in nearly 17 years. Record highs again across the board on Wall Street. The market liking all of this. The Dow gained 23, the S&P 500 rose 8, the Nasdaq was up 50 today. The Dow finished the week almost 0.5% up. The S&P 500 rose a quarter, the Nasdaq jumped just under 1%. Next up, Congress closes in on the Attorney General and his answers in the ongoing investigation into contacts with Russia. Plus, it's the 11 minutes everyone's talking about. Next up, how the president's personal Twitter account was deactivated. New questions in the Russia investigation as Congress calls on the Attorney General to clarify his answers over Russian contacts and meetings in which proposed contacts were discussed. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harris joins me live with the latest in this case. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett. Senior Senate Democrats put out statements today calling on the Attorney General to testify again about Trump campaign contacts with Russia. In a lengthy letter to Sessions, Senator Al Franken, whose questions kick-started the controversy, said, once again, developments in the ongoing investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election have brought to light evidence that you failed to tell the truth about your interactions with Russian operatives, as well as your awareness of Russian contacts by other members of the Trump campaign team. At the Senate Judiciary Committee last month, Sessions was pressed by a senior Republican.
Did you ever overhear a conversation between you and anybody on the campaign who talked about meeting with the Russians?
I have not seen anything that would indicate a collusion with Russians to impact the campaign.
Lawmakers question why Sessions never mentioned this March 2016 national security meeting where campaign aide George Papadopoulos, there in the center, floated the idea of using his contacts to set up a meeting between candidate Trump and the Russian president. Fox News has told Sessions, there on the left, immediately rejected the idea and shut down the discussion. The issue came to a head this week after unsealed court records showed Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying to special counsel investigators about the meeting. For his part, Sessions testified that Senator Franken's question was long-winded and confusing, and cited a breaking news report the Attorney General was unaware of. Brett.
And Catherine, there are some new emails tonight that show the FBI's deputy director did not recuse himself from that Clinton email case until just before the election. What's up with that?
Well, that's right. Critics argue the FBI's deputy director, Andrew McCabe, had a conflict because longtime Clinton ally, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe and his PAC gave McCabe's wife, Jill, nearly $700,000 for a 2015 state Senate race that she ultimately lost. McCabe would go on to help oversee the Clinton email case. The FBI confirmed to Fox McCabe sought internal advice to avoid any potential or actual conflict, and Fox's reporting showed McCabe did not list the 2015 donations or his wife's salary on financial disclosure forms. These new emails were obtained by Judicial Watch, and they show McCabe voluntarily recused himself from the probe that was codenamed Mid-Year Examination, but that didn't happen until November 1st, 2016. Brett.
Okay, Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just before 7 p.m. Eastern last night, the president's personal Twitter account disappeared. For 11 minutes, many wondered what happened. Tonight, national correspondent William Lajeunesse has some answers.
Social media. Without social media, I'm not sure that I would be here talking.
President Trump and Twitter. With 41 million followers, he ranks 21 worldwide. But Thursday night, for 11 minutes, the site shut him down.
When you're looking at a top 25 account, either this person who's very senior
or there's a definite breakdown in internal protocol.
Twitter initially claimed the president's feed was inadvertently disconnected due to human error. 2 hours later, it blamed an employee, saying, quote, "We have learned that this was done by a Twitter customer support employee who did this on the employee's last day. We are conducting a full internal review."
It could be a breakdown in protocol, or it was a rogue employee on their last day.
Why do some doubt Twitter? Deactivating a top account is serious. Few believe one low-level employee has sole authority to do so.
This individual, if he has the ability to take things down, may have had the ability to actually tweet on the president's behalf.
330 million use Twitter. Its biggest stars are actors and musicians, but few tweets carry the influence of the president, and that's the risk.
He could have said something like, "We're going to blow up North Korea tomorrow. Get ready." And all of a sudden, all chaos looms in the diplomatic world and the military world and worldwide.
So when somebody says something about me, I'm able to go bing, 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 and I take care of it.
Critics complain Trump violates Twitter rules threatening others, like Kim Jong-un, or calling for the death penalty. But Twitter says it judges newsworthy items by a different standard. Trump addressed his brief termination, saying, "My Twitter account was taken down for 11 minutes by a rogue employee. I guess the word must finally be getting out and having an impact." Now, late today, Twitter said it has implemented safeguards to prevent this from happening again. Now, while on his Asia trip, we'll see if China can do something that no one in the White House could: stop Trump from tweeting, as China's censors do not allow it for their 1.3 billion residents. Brett?
Just one of the storylines. William, thank you. Up next, exploring for oil in Alaska's wildlife refuge. Could it happen soon? And as we head to break, a live look at Houston from Fox 26. The hometown heroes, the Houston Astros, celebrated the baseball team's first World Series win with a parade this afternoon. It extended 20 blocks due to the size of the hometown crowd that came out to see their favorite players. After all they've been through in Houston, that must feel pretty good. We'll be right back. One day after its much anticipated rollout, Republican lawmakers are already working on changes to their tax plan. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel reports from Capitol Hill on what's already being done to get tax reform to the president's desk.
Chairman Kevin Brady made some technical modifications and slight adjustments to the tax reform package ahead of work next week in the Ways and Means Committee.
Hey, John. Dr. Alex, how are you?
But Brady says a significant change, scrapping Obamacare's individual mandate, could be on the way.
The president feels very strongly about including this at some step before the final process, and he's told me that twice by phone and once in person.
Do you guys have any questions?
Some high-tax state moderates are still fighting for another adjustment.
We should continue the deductibility of state and local taxes. It's been in the tax code since 1913. We send a lot more revenue to Washington than we receive back, and I don't want to exacerbate that situation.
Fox News has learned some leading conservatives asked the White House for 6 key points to be included in the tax plan. Corporate tax rate reduction, small business pass-through rate reduction, reduction of personal income rates for the middle class, repatriation of foreign earnings, permanent elimination of the estate tax, and a new territorial tax system. The chairman of the Conservative Freedom Caucus says he wants a change involving Wall Street.
That carried interest provision for hedge fund managers needs to go away, and really we can use that money for the middle income, hardworking American taxpayers to make sure that they get the relief that they need.
The top Democrat on Ways and Means says this package could explode the deficit.
There might be the sugar high of growth for a year or so, but you're going to be stuck with debt that's going to be passed on to these children for a tax cut for people at the very top.
Getting rid of Obamacare's individual mandate, a tax, would add revenue, but some GOP leaders worry about it further complicating passing tax reform. Brett?
Mike Emanuel up on the Hill. Mike, thanks. The Justice Department is taking aim at the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, who they say misled them about the timing of an undocumented immigrant's abortion. The department is also petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court to vacate a lower court's ruling in that case. Government says the ACLU agreed to inform them when the abortion was scheduled and did not do so, which meant the Justice Department was unable to file a stay in time. I asked Attorney General Jeff Sessions about it in an interview last week.
lawyers that were representing her were determined to have that abortion, and they were able to file, have the abortion at 4:30 in the morning before we were filing a brief the next morning. My lawyers tell me that they were told by their lawyers that that would not happen, and this was a total surprise and really a breach of the kind of confidence that lawyers should be able to have with one another, and we were very upset about it.
The illegal immigrant got that abortion. The ACLU has 60 days to respond to the Justice Department's petition, and then the U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether to hear that case. The controversy over drilling in the Arctic is back open as the Senate debates the renewed possibility of oil exploration in Alaska's National Wildlife Refuge and elsewhere. Correspondent Dan Springer has the drill down from Anchorage.
As part of his goal to make America energy dominant, President Trump has reopened the decades-long debate over oil drilling in the coastal plain of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
This is positive for our country, positive for our economy, positive for our national security.
We will resist their unbelievable attempts to turn public lands over to polluters.
The arguments mirror those made in 2005 when Republicans controlled Congress and the White House but failed to approve ANWR drilling. Now, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee is attempting to raise $1 billion by selling oil leases in ANWR, a plan that would be part of the larger tax reform bill. Many Democrats and environmental groups call it a sneak attack that would defile a pristine jewel.
The massive amount of infrastructure that would be needed in order to develop in the Arctic Refuge coastal plain would undoubtedly have significant impacts to the environment there.
But supporters say one thing that has changed in the last decade is drilling techniques. Much longer horizontal drilling allows for a far smaller footprint on the surface. In 1998, the U.S. Geological Survey estimated there's 10 billion barrels of oil in the 1002 area, a small strip of the 19 million acre ANWR.
It might be as big as a Prudhoe Bay field. And those giant fields do not come along very often. They are the elephants. They are these huge, giant plays that can produce for 40 years.
12 years ago, the same effort to open Area 1002 was eventually killed by a handful of moderate Republicans. Since then, all but two have left Congress, and those remaining, Senators John McCain and Susan Collins, say they're now open to this contentious drilling. Beyond ANWR, though, Fox News has learned the Interior Department is considering an even larger move towards American energy dominance, opening exploration elsewhere. Brett?
Dan Springer in Anchorage. Dan, thank you. In tonight's Whatever Happened To, a look at one city's crisis that caught the attention of the nation. Jody on Twitter wanted to know whatever happened to the water in Flint, Michigan. And on Facebook, Stephanie Forbes Hayward said that she would like to hear some follow-up on the Flint water crisis because she heard the issue has not been resolved. Well, Jody and Stephanie, tonight, senior correspondent Mike Tobin has an update.
Ever since Justice McDonald has been big enough to brush his own teeth, he's done it with bottled water.
We have no other option. I'm definitely not going to take the chance on my children's health.
In April of 2014, under emergency management, Flint, Michigan switched from the Detroit water system to the Flint River as a temporary solution to save money. Residents complained about smell, even hair loss from the water. Lead contamination was detected when doctors found lead in children. Here's the culprit, one of the lead pipes in the city of Flint water system. You see, the water out of the Flint River didn't necessarily have lead in it. What it had was a corrosive chemical. And when that water ran through these household pipes, it ate away at the lining right there, therefore exposing the household water to lead. Once the leaching of the lead starts, you can't stop it. Crews are at work, but 3 years into the problem, less than 25% of the lead pipes have been replaced. Poisonous water flows into most houses.
I'm confused as to why help just hasn't poured into the city just to replace everybody's pipes.
Brigadier General Michael McDaniel was appointed to oversee the replacement in February of 2016.
Well, there was no project at that point. Nothing had been done.
People in Flint believe recovery is slow because they are poor.
I think a lot of the issues that we deal with at the state
and federal levels will be different if you were interacting with people who had influence.
12 people died of Legionnaire's disease after bacteria festered in stagnant pipes. Now 15 state and city officials are facing criminal charges ranging up to involuntary manslaughter.
You taking Thomas?
The McDonald's 4-year-old son Josiah is autistic. There is no conclusive link, but some studies suggest lead poisoning contributes to autism. At some point, city leaders will tell families to drink the water again.
You still don't trust them. You can't trust a word that they say.
Citing a breathtaking failure of leadership, a federal judge gave council members a deadline of last week to come up with a permanent source for the water. Council members missed that deadline and requested a temporary solution. Bret, back to you.
Mike, thank you. Up next, the Democratic National Committee's collusion with the Clinton campaign in 2016 and the fallout from a blockbuster story with the panel.
You want to look at the new book that was just put out by Donna Brazil.
The idea of running for office is pretty terrifying for a lot of people.
She basically bought the DNC and she stole the election from Bernie.
You're going to be criticized no matter what you do.
Pretty shocking that this degree of collusion on some level was taking place during the time of the Democratic nomination fight.
If Vice President Biden had gotten into the race in 2015, would he have had to compete against the DNC the way that Senator Sanders did?
It can be a very brutal experience.
Well, here's some of the sounds of the Democratic Party dealing with battles from within, as this book from Donna Brazil, who was the interim head of the DNC, talking about essentially the 2016 primary on the Democratic side being rigged. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens just days before elections, an off-year election, a big one in Virginia. Here's the Democrat governor of Virginia talking about this.
It's regrettable that Donna thought this was the time she should come out with this complaint. I mean, God love the Democratic Party, but we need to be...
pretty bad timing for Tuesday?
Very bad timing. And, you know, it's just regrettable. We are unified in Virginia, and the Democrats, you know, they love to have the circular firing squad.
Tight gubernatorial race there in Virginia Tuesday. Let's bring in our panel. Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. And Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and publisher. Byron.
Boy, is the president enjoying this. This is the continuing rift of Hillary and Bernie that has not healed and doesn't appear that it's going to heal anytime soon. And to have a person of the stature of Donna Brazil. This is not a bit player coming out and saying this. She was the woman who was selected to try to heal the party after Debbie Wasserman Schultz flames out, and the day before the Democratic convention. So for her to come out and say that this was a rigged game, and also do two things. Also, she not only throws Debbie Wasserman Schultz under the bus, she runs over her multiple times, and she also actually indicates that the ultimate leader of the Democratic Party, President Barack Obama, really kind of abandoned the DNC and wasn't helping at the time. So, I mean, this is really a full-scale indictment of the entire power structure at the DNC.
We should make one correction. James Rosen had $15 billion in the red. It was $15 million, but President Obama did leave the DNC in a tight financial spot. Take a listen to some Sanders folks. We have not heard from Senator Sanders. He's been asked about it. He hasn't answered the question. But others around him have talked about it.
Is Senator Sanders angry?
Well, I can tell you that I am angry. The rank and file of the Democratic Party should choose the nominee of the party, not party elites. You cannot have a political party in a hotly contested presidential primary being controlled by one of the candidates.
This is just further evidence that the DNC needs to be completely overhauled. We must care more about people than protecting the status quo. No more games, no more retaliation, no more picking of winners and losers.
Michael, to Terry McAuliffe's point, this is a Democrat's self-inflicted wound. I mean, this is not Trump trying to turn the page from the Russia investigation or anything else. This is Democrats.
Yeah, and I know that Hillary Clinton, her allies, are furious at this, and colleagues of mine have reported being inundated by texts and emails, just the anger roaring out from that world, and feeling particularly in a week where Democrats had it going pretty good. Paul Manafort and Rick Gates are indicted, and George Papadopoulos signs a plea agreement that, to Democrats' eyes, really propels this narrative of potential collusion with Russia forward. And in general, Democrats were relishing what appeared to be a civil war in the Republican Party. When you talk about intra-party fighting, we're all talking about Steve Bannon going after incumbent members of Congress. Well, now suddenly we're all reminded of the fact that the Democratic wounds are extremely raw, that the Bernie Sanders crowd never got over the primaries and indeed believed that Bernie could have beaten Donald Trump, that only Hillary Clinton could have lost to Donald Trump. That's the view among many hardcore liberals. So absolutely a rough turn of events for the party.
Less so maybe about reliving 2016 and more about the party where it goes next.
Exactly. I mean, this was Donna Brazile sort of shoving the Clintons out the door. There has been talk about a changing of the guard. You know, there's been challenges to Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leadership. And so, but this was pretty dramatic. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this in some time. Donna Brazile is going to sell a lot of books. That was her intent. But it was also just a real indictment of the Democratic structure. One of the other things that Bernie said when the case was rigged against him was the superdelegates. We may see now a push for Democrats to reform the process. So the superdelegates, which lined up in favor of Hillary Clinton and really helped her propel her to the nomination, that might be up for grabs in the coming years.
Now, I will say some news organizations have picked it up today, but when it first came out, it was a tree in the woods. If you weren't watching this channel, there was not a lot of coverage. Here is Rush Limbaugh's take on what happened in the Clinton world.
But since the Clintons took office in 1993, there has not been a single act of what you would call disloyalty until yesterday. The swamp does not want any of this exposed, and yet here comes Donna Brazile. Well, you swamp creatures had better understand something real fast. This is why Trump's president. This is why Trump's elected. He simply is reflecting the thinking of millions of Americans. What is going on?
Byron.
Well, I think he actually has a point. We should point out that we know this Donna Brazile excerpt because Politico published it, so that's good.
I said I give him credit.
I do think that look, the Clintons basically starved. They took the oxygen out of the Democratic room. They starved challengers in the crib. They did something to make sure that they really weren't challenged. And in 2016, look at the Democrats who ran. I mean, you had one 74-year-old man who didn't have anything to lose. You had Martin O'Malley, who the only guy in the real kind of sweet spot of running for president, who just went absolutely nowhere. A lot of the talent in the Democratic Party stayed out of the race because they were intimidated by the Clinton machine. And I think Limbaugh is right that what you see now is the Clintons are weak enough to be attacked.
That's what I was going to say. This is a reminder that the Clinton era is really over. Donna Brazile was not some fringe left-wing character. She was a party establishment mainstay and has spent years defending the Clintons. But this is a sign that that page has turned and people are casting their lot where they see the future of the party, and increasingly I think it is the party's liberal wing.
And quickly, the president did tweet today when he got his Twitter back from the 11 minutes last night. Pocahontas just stated that the Democrats, led by the legendary crooked Hillary Clinton, rigged the primaries. Let's go, FBI and Justice Department. A bit of cheerleading on the sidelines. Pocahontas, of course, is Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, and that is the president's name for her.
Who agrees now that the election was rigged, but supported Hillary Clinton. In the at the convention and whatnot. And it's ironic because I just received an email earlier, I'm sure everyone here did as well, that there's a series of events now celebrating the 25th anniversary of Bill Clinton's election in 1992. They're going to be taking place all around town. So it's sort of an ironic capstone to the Clinton era.
Another panel about the FBI and Justice Department cheering for the president. Next up, the Friday lightning round and winners and losers.
We'll be talking about trade. We'll be talking about, obviously, North Korea. We'll be enlisting the help of a lot of people and countries. We'll see what happens, but I think we're going to have a very successful trip. There's a lot of goodwill.
President Trump, just a short time from now, lands in the first stop on his trip, Hawaii, then off to Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Back with the panel. Quick Friday lightning round. Michael.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating trip. So many things we could talk about. I would just say right now what's on my radar is South Korea's intelligence agency has reported activity around a North Korean missile site that would be consistent with a possible test launch. And I think it's entirely possible that the North Koreans, Kim Jong-un, is going to try to throw his shadow over the early leg of this presidential trip. Particularly, I would say a good bet would be when Trump is golfing with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Remember when Abe was at Mar-a-Lago back in February, Kim Jong-un launched a missile over Japan. They had that cluster around the dinner table with flashlights and maps, caused total chaos. Kim must have loved it. And so you may see Kim once again defining things on his terms.
That'll be interesting. We talked to Shinzo Abe exclusively on Monday. The Twitter verse was disrupted, Byron, for 11 minutes. Real Donald Trump taking down the screen grab showing he wasn't there. Twitter apologized, said it was a rogue employee.
Pretty extraordinary. The President of the United States is at the mercy of a rogue employee of a private company in his chosen medium. I mean, and it's a very big deal. He has 42 million Twitter followers, not as big as Katy Perry's 106 million, but still, it's a big deal. So I think you have to look at this extraordinary situation where the President of the United States, who normally speaks through the White House communications apparatus, is dependent on this private company, and anything can happen.
Yeah. All right, winners and losers, quickly down the road, winner and loser.
Winner, that was easy. City of Houston coming back after tragedy, just like the Saints did after Katrina, just like Boston did after the marathon bombing. Great World Series, awesome finish. City of Houston was a big winner this week. Loser, Justice, the Bo Bergdahl case. Outrage over the fact that he gets to walk free with no time behind bars. 6 people died, others, 6 heroes died, and others were injured for life trying to find this guy, and he walks free. It's an outrage and a disgrace.
Winner and loser.
Winner, going back over several years, but we just learned about it on Monday in court papers, Paul Manafort's tailors, who were paid $1.3 million. We're not quite sure how you're able to buy that many suits. He is a well-dressed man, so congratulations. He looked like $1.3 million, as I like to say to my friends. And loser, George Papadopoulos, the Trump campaign advisor, who remains a little bit of a mystery. Again, learning from court documents, thanks to Robert Mueller. In the worst case, Papadopoulos is a sinister Russian agent who may have allowed the Kremlin to infiltrate the Trump campaign. In the best case, he is what Trump aides are now saying was a coffee boy who had no real responsibility. So either way, it does not come out looking very good.
Winner, Evan Gattis, who a few years ago was a baseball washout with a drug problem and a depression problem, and today is the world champion catcher of the Houston Astros. The loser is Christ Church in Alexandria, Virginia, incredibly historic church of George Washington and Robert E. Lee, and has decided to take down monuments to both of them.
Winner, special report viewers, 6 p.m. Sunday, another special report from Tokyo, Japan. When we come back, the best things heard around the country this week. Thank you, panel. Finally, tonight, a look back on some of the more interesting things said this week. Here's the notable quotables.
Facts are the Russians hacked us.
The first rule in American crime is if you're going to commit a crime, commit it with somebody more important than you are.
Donald Trump is president, not king. He cannot decree things to go away.
What we're talking about is the beginning of cyber warfare.
Facebook is now the leading newspaper in 92 countries.
My opponent, Ed Gillespie, is cut from the same cloth that Donald Trump is.
It's an attack on all Virginians.
A company with 2 full-time employees that existed for only 2 years ends up getting a $300 million contract. Heaven help us.
I believe when an individual yells out Allahu Akbar, all the indicators and hallmarks of an act of terror.
What we have right now is a joke and it's a laughing stock.
Why did the president call the U.S. justice system a joke and a laughing stock?
That's not what he said.
I don't think the president really modulates his language. Have you noticed him do that?
The only people that aren't going to like this is H&R Block.
My mother could never have imagined that one day her son will be here in the Oval Office in the White House.
And my mother, too.
What are President Trump's flaws?
Probably that he has to deal with you guys on a daily basis.
1 week. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Again, we'll be on the road all next week, starting Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be live in Tokyo. The story, hosted by my colleague Martha McCallum from Hawaii, starts right now as the president gets ready to land, probably in minutes.